Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this meetup, design and prototype meetup in New York. Obviously, we are way beyond just New York City today. Besides Brooklyn and New York, I see people from also Lebanon, Canada, UK, Argentina. So that's really exciting. Thank you so much for letting us know where you're from. My name is Francesco. For those that haven't met me yet, I used to be a design ambassador at Sketch, and I've been a designer all my adult life. And for the past year, I've become also I've been working at Sketch as a um, design advocate, which means I help teams of different sizes make the most of Sketch. And one of the things that can improve your use of Sketch and productivity and efficiency as a team is to create a design system and set of libraries. There's different levels of design systems and even just libraries. Libraries are not design systems, just to clarify. Libraries are a means to achieve a portion of design systems. Design systems are both um, a set of components, styles, etc., but also all the rules that go with it. And they help teams collaborate and minimize friction when you're talking between designers and when you're talking between designers and product managers, and we're talking with designers between designers and developers. So anybody on the team will benefit if you start bringing in some best practices from naming conventions to just consistency in general. I'll start sharing my screen. So the design systems in general usually start from the way they happen in reality. You probably start designing something, and at some point, like let's say a mobile app, and after you've explored the direction, you decide to normalize some of this aspect of this app, like from how from text layers to symbols to any kind of component you'll be using. The more you're using these components, the more you probably will feel like you want to codify them. That's what happened to me in many occasions, right? You design something, and then afterwards, if you haven't defined any styles or symbols, you have to go back and tweak things, which is totally fine. And then there's the opposite side of the spectrum, which is you already have a framework that's been defined because maybe it was a digital product already existed. It's been on the market for a while. So, but maybe you are on a team that is fairly new to the practice of design systems, and so you had it only in code, but not in design files. You don't have it in Sketch, and so in that case, some nomenclature has already been defined by developers. Developers tend to be a little more consistent than designers, right? That's one of the, because it's really breaks things fast for them if they don't use any conventions. But so we have a spectrum where there's no system at all, and then one with there's already one that's been defined at the code only. In general, you will start so either from something that was mostly an inspiration to you, something you started designing, or something that is a very, very clear in terms of what colors, what typography, what spacing had, at least from the code standpoint. In general, though, I invite you to create symbols and components. Components being within Sketch, components are not only symbols, which you might have used in the past, but also text styles, layer styles, and color variables. Color variables is a new concept we introduced in Sketch 69, and they can really, if you're familiar with the concept of color tokens, they're pretty much a one-to-one. That's the first concept of token that we introduced in Sketch, so keep that in mind when we're talking about systems within Sketch. We'll try to show how you can use text styles and layer styles in a tokenized way, meaning how you name those styles. But it's not necessarily always a one-to-one on how they're used at the code level, right? Okay, so without further ado, I'll show you how to do things manually and then kind of take a step back and how to automate these processes. I do believe that when you have a process that is the same over and over and over, not only get old, can also become easy to make mistakes. in how you're if you're naming things and every time you have to do it manually, it's very possible that you'll make a mistake. So it's good for teams to create their own tools or use tools out there that make it easier to be consistent. So as I said, in this case, we're pretending we're starting from scratch. We already have an idea of textiles and colors we want to create. And we'll create colors, color variables, color styles, and scales. And we'll create typography scales. And you'll see it just takes a matter of seconds, maybe minutes, to create all these if you're using the right tools. If you use design systems before, you know that, for example, for textiles, you have to create, if you want to allow the use of multiple alignments, you have to create, let's say, a headline 1 that is both left, center, and right, if you want to allow for the 3 possibility in terms of alignment. This will change at some point in Sketch, but at the moment, that's how we work with Sketch. And I assume you're familiar with at least the concept of overrides. I'll talk about those as well. I'll be using today a plugin called FreeFlow, the version you're seeing that I created. FreeFlow, it's a plugin to automate lots of processes. You'll see including batch renaming things, inserting, copying and pasting into multiple artboards, copying and pasting properties of elements. I'll mention the things I'm using for this specific task, so as I use them. Automate is another great plugin that you should consider using because it has a lot of automation as well if you want to speed up your workflow. I'll be using this one that hasn't been released yet. I created to generate symbol states, but I'll integrate it in FreeFlow by the time it's released, so it won't be its own plugin. We'll probably use rename it at some point to just show you how you can batch rename elements across your document, and a super powerful plugin. If you haven't used it yet, do it. And we might use even find and replace. That is more find and replacing content. Okay, so let's say I have 2 colors here, and they're just 2 rectangles with rounded corners. What I want to do, I could go edit it in a bunch of different ways. This document, by the way, is saved to our cloud. I could just select one of them and start creating a style associated with it, or creating a color variable for this. Create color variable here. That would be totally legit. But way of working, a color variable is a way for you to, let's say, define a primary color and then use it in multiple styles, either text styles or layer styles, and making sure that if you update it in one place, we'll update everywhere. I want to show you first how to create a color scale. And in this case, the names are really important here because the color scale will use these names as to name the colors. So you might have seen color scales from, for example, material design. They have usually 9 or 10 steps. You've seen other ones that are much shorter. I invite you to use the least amount of colors in your scales. You don't want to necessarily you're probably not going to use necessarily in all 10 steps, and because you usually want to have a decent level of contrast in between the elements you have on there. So there's a reason for having tons of colors in your documents, but it's good. You can also add them later on. I'll do it one color at a time, so I can talk over it and not. Okay, so create colors. I have to make sure to pick the same scale for both, obviously. So in this case, I'm going to choose this. And I'm going to do the same here. And as you can see, it named all the layers correctly. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I could also just rerun the plugin, right? And now I'm going to choose the same scale. So, and it was this one. So, okay. Now you'll see that these ones, and intentionally I'm not going to change them for now. The reason is because if we create color variables from these, you'll be able to update them anyway later on. So just stick with me for the time being. You see this worked pretty well as a scale. I could probably bring a little more purple there if I wanted to. Okay. And so now we have a bunch of colors that are correct. Here I said we'll change those later. Now, the next step is to basically create styles that match these this color. So I can apply these styles to, let's say, buttons, text, etc. especially obviously fills. So again, FreeFlow, batch create this, and then I can choose text and layer styles from selected elements. Okay, so now I selected those. Should be pretty quick. I'm spinning for a few seconds, and then we'll create now 14 styles from all this. And okay, so now if I select this, showing primary 30, if I select this one, primary 0. You can always change, and I'll show you how to edit these styles. If I do Control 2, I'm going now to look at layer styles, and you can see I have all the styles already defined, visible here as well. Okay, and here I could do operations like, let's say, if select all these, I could search, for example, primary, and so then do Command A to select them all. And now with Command G, I can group them all. Now and I think this is unfortunately, I'm sorry, but I think this is because of Zoom, sometimes there's some conflicts with some lower resolution here. So I might have to change it back to the previous one.
You can still do it with the right click.
Let's see. No, it's not even appearing the right click. And so I apologize. I have to switch back to the previous dimension. Okay. So I'm sorry. I have to go back to at least this resolution. Otherwise, some stuff won't work. The problem is once that is kind of broken, let me just quit Sketch and reopen. Welcome to the, doing things live. That's always nice. Okay. We launch the beta. Okay, starting point. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to do Control 2, go to the layers, and there's something wrong that is not giving me the option to group them. So not sure, might be a bug that we introduced with the specific beta, but normally you can just
download them here, and then when you're
okay. So let me show you how you can do it. So if I not generated styles already, I could also undo all this, a few steps. No, sorry. Obviously, I'm gonna remove the styles because I closed the file. Otherwise, I would have been able to just undo. Were you able to do it yourself, Matteo? Yeah. It for some reason is not letting, now allows me to do it. So let me try to write here. Now, are you still in the field or not? I'll let you.
I was muted. No, I moved away right now. So
I'll let you rename the style so actually we can show collaboration.
Okay.
So basically, I'll keep working, and Matteo will be making changes. Matteo might even change those colors here for the orange. So let's pretend I'm the one setting up the structure, and then somebody else in this team is actually finessing the design. So it could be the relationship you have with a UX designer setting up components in the most basic level and with the intent, and then somebody else going in and finessing typography, etc. Right? So now that I created a few styles there, now I'm going to show you how I can create a typography scale. You might be familiar with scales. They usually have different factors, and in this case, the way the plugin works is that you can choose starting from a defined text style for your body. And in this case, I have made it 16, and I gave a very generous line height. Starting from that, you can then create a typography scale. And here you can choose what is the scale factor you want. In this case, I'm going to do 1.25. Okay. When I hit OK, it will generate a lot of different styles, as you can see. A lot of different text layers. The reason why it doesn't generate text styles is because you might not need all of them, right? Not every system always has all the alignment. So in this case, I'm going to show how we can also quickly remove them. The fact that they are aligned this way is because it will make it easier to then select only smaller portions of these. In this case, I'm going to also create a secondary one and secondary text here, and I'll rerun the plugin. You can always rerun a plugin with Control-Shift-R. Okay, I'm going to choose the same scale. And now I have both primary and secondary. They look very similar intentionally, and now I'm going to actually change things in batch. So I could decide to apply, for example, a different color. Yeah, this is a thing that's super annoying that happens with zoom and the scale. Where these don't work anymore. Like I cannot pick a color. And let me see how I can do it. I'll do it in a different way for now. So I might have to quit. If I restart, I think Matteo, you'll be still on the call. So I don't think we should lose anybody.
No, I think we are.
It might be my only way to, unfortunately, get back the popovers, because I think if I quit, I'm gonna quit again and try it this way, just to make sure I'm using a beta of Sketch. Okay, let's see. The colors are, no, that's not it. Let me open recent. Let's see. Okay, 1 second. Hold on. Okay, see if hopefully it will work this way where I can choose. Yes, this came back. Okay, and that should work for text as well now. And instead doesn't work because I think the window is too. Yes, I know what the bug is. Okay, so now you can see these are the color that I migrated from a previous library, previous version of Sketch. Here I can just apply now. I'm just going to apply a color. Let's pretend we want the smaller text to be more on black, and let's pretend that these we want them to be on a different type of color that stands out a little more. Now you're probably not going to use this is just for the sake of presentation, so we can see the differences. And let's say I could decide that I want H1s to be H1 up to H4, maybe to be in color. And I could decide to create all these styles, totally legit, but I can also decide just to do a subset. So I want to show you how you can easily select a smaller set. So in this case, I'm going to remove these, and I'm going to remove the first 4 set here and move it up here. So we could decide to name things with primary text and secondary text. We could decide to hold them, instead of primary text, we could hold it headlines. Depends where you draw the line. In this case, because I have also an headline 5 as part of the what I'm still calling. I think I might have done something, but I'll show you how to fix it. So now it says primary text. We will change it, and I'll use now a different plugin. Rename it. Rename. Select the. Replace the layers and artboard names. So I'm going to do this, and you can still see, right, even the modals, just to make sure they're not. So I'm going to change primary to secondary. Okay, and now this will change all the names here. The reason for doing this is because, again, we'll use these names on the left as a way to generate the text styles. And now we're going to rerun the plugin that we ran before that generates things in batches. And so batch create text and layer styles. The plugin is running. Okay, and you can see it generated multiple text styles. So now if I go here, I can see primary text and secondary text. The point of generating, of doing, there's a lot of, some of these things can be done in a lot of different order. But I think that is the nice thing about learning how to do things in batches, that you'll be less scared of like, oh my God, I have to create all these styles. Oh my God. And being able to use all these plugins will make it easier for you to go and change things as it normally happens. I've never seen a project where you start from the beginning in one way and you make it all the way to the end without ever having to change anything. This happens when a library is not well defined at all, and it happens also when you have a project going on for a long time. So now we have all these styles, and if I go Control-2, I can see that I have all these styles here, right? It's been generated in a group for me. I can just see the primary ones. I can see the secondary ones. I can also go here now. If I wanted to make some changes, I could make them at this level. But I don't have to do it all on the canvas. I'll show you now how to do some of these changes directly from native Sketch feature, which is really cool. So if I had defined if I define color variables, I could already apply color variables here. Now I'm going to show you how to create a color variable. From here, I'm going to call it secondary text. Okay. And then in this one, I'm going to select all these, and I'm going to apply, create a color variable. I'm going to call it primary text. I could have also just defined 2 text layers and say generate color variables from these text layers, and it would have used the names of the layers to generate color variables. So there's a lot of ways to achieve something similar. But the nice thing about it now, if I created this color variable, if I go back here, if I were to just edit a color variable from here and say edit color variable, just remember one thing. The first thing you want to do here is not change the color, but to click edit. Otherwise, you'll be making just local changes and then not changes to the actual variable. So in this case, let's say I want to make it a little brighter, and actually just so we can see the change, apply a completely different color. So I'm going to go for this. When I update it, you'll see now updated everywhere. And of course, also in components browser, I can see the change. And if I go to colors, I also can see my primary text and secondary text. Okay, and Matteo, sorry, before I think there was the only question was about size, right? And I'm sorry we had to kind of change.
They ask you also if you can make full screen sketch, so at least they can see the entire, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move you down here. So that will make it, okay, because otherwise we're covering this part. Okay, so now we have textile. So now next step was a system like this would be at least, for example, to define text links. And I could do it, let's say, duplicating paragraph, renaming Command R and calling text link, right? And then I'm going to call it here text link 2. And we'll associate now another color variable to this. Let's pretend the links are going to be in blue for now. Okay. So now when you have something like a text link, you need to not only create, you need to create probably also the hover states, press state, disable state. So you could just go and duplicate like this, Option and Shift, right? Or just pressing Command D, and we'd also duplicate and create another link. But for operations that are repetitive like this, one thing that Matteo and I are exploring is a way to generate these other states for components and for text, and even for layer styles that will make your job much easier. We talked about before about naming conventions. This is one other place where naming conventions are really important. So everybody jumping on your project know exactly what the intent was for that style. So in this case, I'm going to go here. This portion, the generate states plugin, will become part of FreeFlow. It now says symbol states, but it works also for text states. So it understands what element you selected. In this case, you see is text link and hover. And so if you're familiar with, so the first one, let me make it bigger. This one is called text link default. This is one of the standards that you can use. We'll be providing a way to support whatever standard you want to use for yourself. If instead, for some reason, you decide to use this, you can always use the renaming plugin to change names. But we want you to be able to define your standards for each team. So let's say, in this case, we're using default, hover, pressed, tap, and disable. Now, you might not have to define all these. This is, though, a good starting point for you to know what you should actually be designing. So maybe that sometimes you don't design all these things from the get-go, but at some point you might have to define them to complete your system and to make sure, because otherwise the developer will ask you. And you don't want to have a default state and a hover state that look the same. So let's pretend now, if I go to hover state, let's pretend we're going to have, actually, one thing I didn't do here. I did not define the states yet. So I'm going to turn this into styles, plugins, FreeFlow. And you can see it's always the same commands. It's always basically this drop down for this kind of things we're creating now. So I'm going to create now text styles for text links that are defined this way. So if I go here, you see that style is applied and so on. So that means that at any time I can go and refine this. So let's say we wanted the hover state to have an underline. I'm going to go really fast here. Pressed, we wanted to change the color slightly. So let's say I'll go a little darker. And then here we have the tab. I'm actually going to remove tab for now because it should be there too, obviously for accessibility. For now, I'm just removing just so I can show you. You don't have to keep everything. And then disable, we're going to make it a little lighter, right? Okay, so I'm not saying these are accessible colors. We should be testing for those too. And I probably will be doing another meetup just around accessibility. For the time being, I just want to show you something that is quick so you get the gist of how things are created. So one thing you can do here is also now decide to tidy things up if you want to have homogeneous space between the elements. The other option is just to instead leave the states in the place where they were generated. So if you have multiple textiles, for example, like you have a light and dark version of it, you can then select them just going down as a grid. Okay, so now we created these styles here. And one of these has not been updated. So if you, for example, you modify a style, you just click here to update. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing for a button. This button, this is the simplest button possible. Here I'm going to call it label. And this background. There's a lot of strategies for buttons. I'm going to start from the simplest one, and then we can, if you have any questions, there's ways to create nested buttons so that, for example, the background is utilized across all your clickable component, for example, so that you have a consistent rounded corners everywhere. So I can make that a symbol of that as well. There's ways to, from the default state, to nest it inside others to generate the variance for the other states. In this case, I'm just going to start first from generating the other states. Sorry, from here, generate states, generate symbol states. I apologize. I should have selected in Sketch, whenever you select something, if you press enter, we'll go enter that element. If I were to do it again, I can now type something there. If I press escape, I can go up one level. If I press escape again, now at the object level, at the artboard level. Before I had selected background, and that's why I created all the other multiple layers for background. I could use that technique too if I want to create multiple background styles. In this case, we're focusing on generating for the button, primary button. And actually, let's do this. First, let's generate background style. Intentionally going to make it smaller so it doesn't look like it's the same object. So running the plugin, again, I can run it again. Now I have the right naming conventions. As you hover, press tab for example, background. And also for this one, when I go here, I can just now apply primary, I've not generated styles. I've only created layers. That's why it wasn't showing up over there, right? So I can do plugin, FreeFlow, batch create symbols, and in this case, I'm going to create styles. Okay, so now that allows me to go back here, select this one with command. If I were to click here, what you see in Sketch when you hover something, it shows you the top level element you can select. If you press command, then you can dig into it and find the element you really wanted to select. So in this case, I'm gonna, this document, background default, okay? So now that I've applied the style there, I can also decide to apply, create a style for this. Let's do it. So we have that available. Gonna put it here, down here actually. Because it's white, I'm gonna put actually a different kind of background behind it so we can see the effect. Okay, I'm gonna lock it because I don't want to interfere with other things. So just now, Command-Shift-L will lock the selected element. Now selecting this again, it's called label. And I can run the plugin to generate the states. Matteo, keep me honest here too if I made mistakes along the way. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but yeah, just so you know. And as you see, I have all the styles. So now I'm going to do, let's say on hover, I could decide to change the color a little bit. And I can also just press 80, press numbers on my keyboard to associate transparency like you would do in Photoshop. So 8480, and I'm going to then here, I'm going to do for pressed, let's say I'm going to darken it instead. And so I don't have not generated a scale of grays. I could have. So for now, I'm going to choose a color here that is okay. Might be a little too much. We'll figure it out on this background. But the point is that's why you need enough variations in your colors, but not too much, right? So this one instead is a tab, and I'm going to make it underlined. And here, disabled, I'm going to just choose a color that will make it, for the time being, just disappear slightly. And Matteo, I think, Matteo, have you been creating colors in the background or styles?
I just created the color variables, and now I'm going to apply them to the background styles.
Perfect. Perfect. Actually, don't do that part because I can show how they can be.
I'm sorry, I have to remove them then. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. You can remove. So the point is, because I wanted to, if you've been working with libraries for a while, and I know that there's a mixed audience today with people that never created a library and some that already been using it for a while. Before before color variables, there were certain ways of doing things. If you want to take advantage of the variables, it's good to migrate your library to use the color variables. And I wanted to show you how to do that. And yeah, just wanted to show you how to do that. But we'll see. If it's already not a problem.
Yeah, no, I can remove them. I use them to apply them to the background. If you see in the bottom, you've got different styles updated.
Yes. Okay. This one, for example.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna remove the color variables.
Okay.
So you can recreate them from scratch.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem.
So, okay, let's pretend disabled that we're going to make it 50%. Okay. So now these are just text layers, and I'm going to create again styles from this. So I might go a little faster, but I'm going to create now styles from this. So now we have a good mix of, at least as a starting point, of, typography, text links, labels for buttons. And so I can apply here, for example. I can choose this and then label and the default. Okay. So if I run this other plugin, and so here we're just going to call it label and background to keep it very, very simple. Obviously, we could have icons. We could have lots of other elements in a button. We could have a separate border. I just don't want to complicate it too much for today. Also, time check. We are about 40 minutes in terms of recording. I think we started around 1:10. So if I duplicate this now with, okay, people keep coming. Okay, great. And let me see, generate states. So now it's generated all these other buttons for me. And I could approach it two ways. I can just go here, and for each of them, select not default, but let's say hover, right? I could do same thing here, and then pressed. And I could do, hopefully the way Matteo and I are working on this plugin, we'll be able to also associate. If you're ready to find styles, they're following a certain naming convention, you'll be able to also generate at least a starting point for all of these other buttons automatically. And now disabled, okay. And so you might not have to do this manual, but this is already much faster than if you had to do really everything manually. So hover, and let me make it a little bigger so we can see I'm just applying these styles. It could also do that you'd split the duties, and let's say Matteo keeps applying these effects to, okay, Matteo is changing, as you can see, he's also changing some other styles, which is great. This is the beauty of live collaboration. One thing I did not point out, I can always click on somebody and see what they're working on. So in this case, and you can see Matteo completed this.
You can't see me because I'm in the component view.
Okay, makes sense. But if Matteo were on another page, I'd be able to also follow them and go see in what, whatever they're doing in another page. He cleaned up nicely this. Here I could decide, let's say I want to give more space in between. So let's say 24, and so I'm creating a better typography scale. The point is like with any design, you always want to iterate, right? So we're just establishing the building blocks, and then later on we'll present it better. We could add a title here to present the scale, so it becomes a more of a style guide as part of your design system. But that part, I think most of the people have figured out. It's more like how to build them in a very efficient way. So as you can see, the fact that he updated the background tab style to have a border right here applied also to the button, because we applied the same style. Now, this is one way to create buttons. Another way can be, I'm going intentionally to delete these. I can just go, instead of creating a button, but just recreating every button, the advantage of let's go back. The advantage of the system, I have full control on each of them. If I wanted, for example, to show on hover or pressed that this changed slightly in size, I could, right? It makes it very easy to create that kind of change. If instead your structure stays the same across the board, if it stays across the board, you might not need to, you might be able to achieve similar effects in slightly different ways. So in this case, I'm going to show you how I can also, for example, add a background, group this background here, and add an elevation. Okay, so by elevation is going to be just a style. The only thing it has is a shadow. So for example, here I can say elevation, it's going to be elevation 1, and then we'll go back to elevation 0 for the default. So let's say for this, let's make it a little more obvious. Actually, I'll make it, this is going to be basically used for hover states. Okay, and I'm going to create it. I'm going to call it elevation, and I'm going to group it elevations, elevation 0, 1. Now, I might ask Matteo to create a couple other ones, because we're not building a whole system today. We're just building the key parts. But imagine those elevations could be used to cards, for modals, and the higher in the stack they are, the more likely that they'll have a higher number in the elevation. So the other thing I'm going to do, so here I have elevation, and I'm going to intentionally detach this and create another elevation instead. It is 0, 0. I can also, I'm going to leave the value there so we know why it's being created.
I created the other 3 styles with elevations, yeah.
Oh, great. Including 0?
Yeah, 0 was already, no, I didn't do 0.
I'll create. No, it's fine. I'm creating. So this is another nice thing, right? Live collaboration still requires some communication. A lot of times Matteo and I design things together and we can move things around, but then we also have a Zoom call going on in the background, so you can talk about assign tasks. Obviously, when it's completely async, you might need another way to leave tasks for somebody else, either from Slack, project management tool, whatever it is. But I really enjoy being able to talk over whatever I'm working on. So elevation 0, 0. Actually 0. I'm going to call it 0 for now, and intentionally remove this, update it. And so now we have this structure here, which is very basic, but has a label. It has a background, and I'm going to pin it so it's pinned everywhere. And also pin it this way here. Now what we're going to do is remove the contents here quickly and keep the structure. And but take this button here and insert it inside the others. I'll show you how you can insert by inserting. In this case, we are nesting, and the point is, so if I go and change the rounded corners here, we'll change everywhere at once, because as you know, rounded corners are not part of a style. Anything that is about appearance here is not part of the style. Anything below is saved when you create a style. So I'm gonna take this. In Sketch, there's no copy and paste from, let's say, a source symbol to as an instance. So you have to insert it. You can do it this way, right? And go find. Every time somebody wants to arrive, okay. Insert symbols, this document. This is one way to do it. And as you can see, the others are empty, which is totally fine. I can go and copy everywhere the same thing. In this case, it's not that many, so I could do it manually. The other thing I can do is to, as you might have noticed here, I can search. I can also search default, right? And I see first and foremost results from the same document. So I can just click here and now insert it, right? And it snaps there. That's another way to do it. I could also do it by just press from here. I could click this to expand, or I could press C to, I could press C to bring up what we're calling, and I mentioned in the meetup, sorry, there's a lot of windows that are covering my stuff. Okay. Pressing C toggles the insert window. You can decide to pin it so that it stays always on top if you want to, or you can decide to not pin it, and the moment I drag something from this element, from this window into the canvas, this window will disappear. As you can see with the insert window, I can also see all the other libraries I've activated, and we'll get there, I promise. This is a design system here that's been built using multiple libraries, from having core components like text and colors in one library, and then having buttons, icons, for example, has separate library. There's different strategies. They all have their pluses. So if there's any specific questions, I'll will mention those as well later on. Just want to show, this is another way to insert a symbol. Just drag it, right? But I think sometimes you do need to copy and paste multiple objects at once. So in this case, I'm going to set this as the source of what I want, as if I copied and copy and paste. But with FreeFlow, you set something as a reference, and then you can decide to paste that inside any other object, keeping the position. So in this case, though, I want to just paste in place, paste copy of reference element. As you can see, is a very long shortcut. I might change it over time. I didn't want to conflict with anything else you might be using. So, but if I do this, now we'll paste the same primary default in all these. And the advantages, as I was saying before, is now if I want to make it smaller, that is affecting all the other states. If I want to change around the corners, right, that's happening everywhere. So I could take it to another extreme, which is creating, not an extreme, if you're familiar with atomic design, I could decide to make here background plus elevation and make that just a symbol. And now I have a symbol here that is nested first in this and through that in everything else. So I could make the change here, right? And would affect the whole system. Because imagine if I use this symbol here, also for background of a card or things like that, I'll be able to affect around the corners of every element in my document. So now the thing we need to do though, to achieve primary hover, the only thing I need to do is go and select for the label. I want to choose not default, but hover. And for the background, in this case, I made it a symbol. So I need to go and select. I could have other symbols of this background with specific elevations, and that would be a method. But in this case, I'm just going to change the style overrides. So here, I'm going to choose, let's see, hover. So we achieve that. Now, so now we have that here. We're going to do pressed.
You can show that you can also drag the style from the insert within you. Just
yes.
To show the case.
Very good point. So one thing I can do here, once you selected an element that you want to override, you see I have now text here and also background and elevation, right? So I could obviously go here and change it. That's totally fine. Let me make it a little smaller so we can see both the insert window and this at once. If you have, there's multiple ways of working with the insert window. If you have multiple screens, you can obviously place the insert window on a separate window altogether. And so it's very handy that way. You could decide to, I use magnet. And one thing you can do is say, okay, I want to occupy the third right here. And for the design, the canvas, I want to occupy the left 2/3. So now I have, not sure why I didn't do it properly there, but you can just adjust it, but at least you're maximizing the real estate. So for example, from here, we already applied it correctly. For pressed, I can just go in here and just choose from this document only, and I can decide to apply here, not the default, but can apply we said this is pressed, so I can just drag it and apply like this. So now you see we're getting consistency here. I can do it here. I can do tab, drag it, right? So obviously if I have a short menu here, it depends, it's really your choice how you want to do it. But when you start having long menus, be able to search here for just the style you want and apply it is really, really way more convenient. And lastly, I'll do disabled. So we have this button, probably done. Okay, so now same thing for text. I'll switch to text here and I'll start going backwards. So disabled, and then here there was the tab. Oops, sorry. Yep. And same thing here, that's pressed. But that's what I'm saying. As you can see, it's once you're using a system and the naming convention is very defined, you'll be able to create these components really quickly. And if you're following the standards, it makes it much easier for us to potentially automate some of this. At Sketch, we're also working on launching states as a native feature. This is a way to accomplish some of these things in the meantime. Okay, so here, hover, yep, as already defined. So good. So this button should be pretty good. So now I can save this, and I can open another document and use this as a library. So I'll share that. I'll show that in a second. And let's see. Matteo, remind me. I know that we went through this before. Okay, so we created now buttons, styles, text, and now one thing that we haven't created yet is the color variables. So when you open a document that, for example, either an old document where you were not using color palettes, or just because you want to define new color variables, one way to do it is to make sure to run the plugin, FreeFlow, batch create, and in this case, color variables from selected elements. Okay, so now you can see it created all these variables, and primary text and secondary text also defined. So now the last step is we created all these beautiful styles right here, but they were not using color variables yet. Well, there's a plugin for that. You could define, obviously, I could go manually and apply. So for example, if I wanted that to be primary, okay, just that, I could do it that way. And then the problem is I would have to then manually update the styles, which is not the end of the world, but you know, if you can avoid something, at least I'm pretty lazy. If you can avoid doing repetitive tasks, why not? And so there's one plugin that created by Ale, another coworker of mine. He's an amazing developer. It's created probably a lot of plugins you might have used already. But in this case, the one he created is called Color Variable Migrator. And what it does, color variables, basically will find all the places within your document that we're using the same values in color values that you have for, and apply color variables to those elements. So let's say I had a background that we're using a certain red, and that the red was defined as a color variable. We'll do the matching for me and update all the styles for me. So that's huge, because otherwise you would have to do it kind of manually. So now, in this case, I really just need to leave everything checked. Click migrate.
Yeah.
Yes, it worked. Great. So now, for example, if we use the same color here for border, we could, so that one probably was, let's say something like that. No, maybe it was a little lighter. Okay, so I'm gonna update this, and that will update obviously everywhere. So now one way to create, for example, I could create another set. I could create now, for example, I could make these secondary buttons, and I could just delete these, create a secondary version of this that is not based on how to create a, either I could do it this way, secondary, and then here choose a border that's using the primary color, and fill that's just using white for the time being. And let's pretend that this is going to be 2, so a little thicker. And then, so this is just the background, right? Then we'll have to change also the style here. So now I can go in this one and background elevation, choose, where did I put it? It's called secondary, and sorry, I'm going to call it backgrounds.
Okay, just created a default background for secondary, not the elevation, just the background.
Okay, so now here I'm going to apply, this is we had these textiles right here, right? And now I'm going to create, we can do label secondary if you wanted to.
You will be able to use the same if you, with the
I could change the style.
Orange backgrounds, but yeah. So,
and this is where, at a certain point you start getting into real details. It's up to your team to figure out what are the aspects of this button need to be flexible and I need to change. Let's do that. I'll let Matteo figure that part out, how he wants to handle the secondary buttons. I'm just going to select these and rename it so that wherever it said primary, we'll say secondary. Okay, so now we have a completely different set. I'm just going to copy this and insert it in here. So it tells Matteo as a starting point. And you see that the label, in this case, I emptied everything. I apologize. Not that one. I need to copy this one, the button secondary default, define that as the starting point, and now apply it inside this. Okay, the look is the same, but then that means I can actually select. Exactly. So the secondary doesn't have to be inverted. It could be another color altogether. So there's a lot of ways to, because in fact, it makes sense because these are the colors that we were using as secondary, right? So we could define now another set of styles and so on and so forth. This is much slower because I'm talking through all of it. But if you just follow the steps, it would be really, really fast. Honestly, at the end of the day, that's why I really feel like automation is important. Your workflow, because the toughest part should be making design decisions, should not be actually creating all these variation in your files. Okay, let me see. Okay, any questions so far? Otherwise, since I've been talking for an hour and 50 minutes, I do need to go get some water. I'll be right back.
Questions at the moment. Maybe I can invite at least 2 guys sent me over the email, so I can invite them to the file.
Perfect. Yes, let's do that. While you invite them, I'm just gonna grab some water and be right back.
Yeah. So we have a question from Jacqueline, but maybe I'm gonna wait you when you're back.
Sounds good. Be right back.
Yeah. Jacqueline, maybe you can place the question directly to everyone, not only to myself, so everyone can read the question. Thanks. And someone is asking me if we are gonna share the recording. Yes, we are gonna share it both in Twitter and LinkedIn, so you will find a link to the video. Not probably today, in next week. We can also share the file. Yes, we can. Let me invite people to our file. Settings, sharing permissions. I'm gonna invite. Only 2 guys sent me over their email address. Does anyone else has got the Sketch Beta installed and they want to jump on the file? Sorry, just inviting them.
I'm back. Let me see. I'm gonna see if I have anybody in private that send me.
Okay.
Emails.
Invitation sent. So there is one question from Jacqueline. She asked, when one auto-generate variations, what are these variations based on?
So at the moment, that's a very good question. So at the moment, those variations are based on 2 things. Basically, we defined, for example, the variations for buttons. Usually, the pattern is that the default buttons call ends with like their default or standard, or there's a lot of different names. There depends on the framework you have in mind to utilize. some framework comes already with this decisions made for you. And so you want to make sure you're not reinventing the wheel with name conventions. If you're starting from scratch, you also want to make sure that you're working with a team, other team members. They might be coming from other teams, and so you need to agree to a convention. Once we release the plugin, you'll be able to define the states for yourself and for your team. So don't worry if now it says default and you want to call it something else. You totally can. You'll be able to edit it to whatever name you want to use. Also, you can otherwise just use the plugin as is and then go later on and change it. So you can always change these names, and everything that's connected to them will also update. So if you were using a default symbol and you change the name, that will also be updated automatically, and you won't lose anything. So did that answer? Oh, great! I see Vincent in there. Nicholas, let me see if if I can see other people. I'm definitely Brad Fry.
I invited other 3 people. So Jacqueline, the plugin is something that at the moment is hard-coded. So we hard-coded the names and the sizes of the scales, etc. But this is definitely something you can manage. Actually, I think that the typography scale is something you can decide in your plugin, don't you, Francesco?
Yes, correct. Let me just bring
maybe you can go through that just a second again, just to show the plugin how you can manage it.
Yes. Okay. So basically, now the states are generated on your behalf without you being able to choose. But as Matteo said, let's say I'm going to recreate another scale here really quick, so we can see what to make the parallel between. So now I'm going to call it body and just call it typography. Okay, and Vincent is lurking here, is looking what I'm doing. He can select other things, like for example, if you wanted to change the background color to something else, he totally can. He can even change while I selected the same object, he could change the color, for example, and I could change other parameters, other properties, and there would be no issue. I'm going to detach from here. So now this is just a base text layer. When I run the plugin, in this case, for generating typography scale here, typography scale, I get to choose one of the scales. If instead we were defining the states, I could choose, imagine a drop down here where I can choose, okay, what kind of framework are you using? Are you using Bootstrap? Are you using, another thing that is custom? So you'll either be able to define your own or use other sensible defaults that come from other systems. Does that make sense, Jacqueline? Okay. Feel free to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question directly instead of in chat.
I was going to say exactly that. I think that we ended with this part of the presentation, and now we want a bit more interaction, if that's okay with everyone, because we really, what we really wanted was to showcase something that we are working on at the moment. It's still a work in process, as you can see, but it really works. We tested it to do that without talking about it at the meantime, and actually in like 5 minutes we had more than that. Than what you can see here. So it really works. And we think that this is a very good way to manage things. Francesco, maybe one thing that is missing is about the assistant that we also created for that.
Oh, right. I apologize. Yes, I was, I quit a bunch of times, so the file disappeared. So while you guys are on this file, feel free to mess with it. We'll see what happens the time I come back. I'm going to open another file. And what I wanted to show you is, let's see, assistant demo should be here. Nazia just joined. Let me open here. Okay, so now we talked a lot about how to create things, and I showed you how you can use the insert window to drag things in nest elements. Let's say if we wanted to use the insert window now to design something, I would have to just add, let's say, this document. Let's pretend now this is beautifully done. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to the cloud here, and by this drop down, you can see who else has been working on this file, and you can also copy the link to send it to somebody else that's on your team, or you can share the document. In this case, I want to view on cloud. So in this case, it's opening our Teams account. And as you can see, I can see all the core elements already defined and the same artboards. I can even choose to switch to WIP. In this case, there was something else Matteo was working on, and just see one specific page at a time. If I created a symbols page, which intentionally we didn't create at this point, all the symbols would also be displayed as filterable that way. Once I go here, you can see I have all these other library defined. For something to become a library, and this is, I need to go here, document settings, and then under general, I have to click this use as library. This has changed literally in the last week or so. We upgraded how sharing and permissions work. As you can see, this is how Matteo invited all other people. So under here, now that I define it as a library, when I click save, when I go back here, I now
have to add it as a library.
Yep. Now it's I set it as a library. Now the next step is I command comma, go into preferences, and I can go into libraries. And then for that, I have a lot of teams. In your case, you probably wouldn't. So in this case, I just need to find that collaboration team. Or I can also search here, and that was called core, I believe. And as you can see, I have a lot of core libraries because I made a lot of examples. So if I click here, now add a library, and that library now is available to me here. Core. Okay. So this document here is the core library. So now I have to open a new document, right? And when I open this new document, I'm going to see DS core starting point. Obviously, the name would make a lot more sense to you. It could be just design system and then your company name, things like that. But the beauty of it is I now can just dragging things in from here, and they will be referring to going back to that library. So let's say I have this project I created, and I want to, it's a sign-up flow. Let's pretend I know a mobile app. And it's intentionally very basic because I just want to show you how you can quickly create something from this. Okay, I can move this in here. I could decide to start applying styles as I showed before. So let's say I have styles from, and I could decide to apply actually an elevation to this card. And let's say elevation would be this one. And now the only thing is let me ungroup this 1 second. I had too many styles. This background here was transparent. So now I'm going to make it instead, another color. I could decide to choose, ideally you want to create a style. So you could decide to create local styles, but usually it's best to kind of go back to the main library or a library and create styles there. It can make sense to have only local styles, but I think if you're working with systems, the risk is that the moment you start creating local styles, then you will forget that those exist. So at the very least, if you create local styles, move them into the general library once they get approved, so that you can make sure things are always consistent. So now you see I apply that. I could decide to drop in some text. Let's see, I want to see some of the text we created. Let's say this is one problem because I'm working on a mock file that's not really using the let me do it this way. I'll just make it white for now, intentionally. It's just going to want to be able to show you that I can drop in some text, right? And obviously I can put it in here. I can, if this were centered like that. But let's say in this case, I don't want to make, I said gigantic H1, so I'm going to move it outside. And now I can drop in not an H1, but let's say an H2 or even H3. Then go down here. Once I select these three elements, now I can start spacing them using tidy. And for example, I can decide to 24 pixels in between all these elements. So that's how all these things work together. This makes it really easy to insert stuff. The one thing I want to show you though is this other concept of assistance. By raise of hands, I'd love to see if there's a way, how many of you have used Assistant or heard of Assistant?
Yeah, I heard Francesco about assistance, but unfortunately we didn't have the time to work with it yet.
Okay, no problem. we
But
can.
I'm trying to like integrate it within our workflow. And especially like for I'm not talking about creating new rules, but I think the rules that you already created, guys, are perfect.
Yeah. So Vincent was saying that basically this feature called Sketch Assistant allows you to be aware when if was introduced to Sketch 68. So if you have a lower version, you've never even seen it. If you go Control click here and do Customize Toolbar, you'll be able to drag this icon up there if it's not part of your toolbar already. Assistants are basically a set of rules that you as an individual or as a team can define. And they can be rules about naming conventions, can be rules about, let me close this, make those bigger. Can be rules about, okay, the window is, of course, always in the other window. Can be rules about, as I said, naming conventions, accessibility, styles that you might have used or not, and telling you if somebody has detached a symbol, or in your system you don't allow to do that. That will help you find those symbols and replace them with the correct symbol you should be using. Or let's say one thing that we're working on is, in this case, this assistant that will tell you that there might be some elements from uninspected libraries, meaning in this case saying button icon, and when you click on it, we'll take you, let me move this slightly. When you click on it, we'll take you wherever, no matter what it is. It could be on a separate, I could be on a symbols page and click on this, and that will take me to wherever the error is. So these are all different assistants. Some are by me, some are other. This is, for example, from Sketch. This is also from Ale, the guy that created the migration plugin. And there's tons of ways of using assistants. As I said, from accessibility to consistency to checking if things are the right sizing. This is just an example, but the most powerful assistants are usually the ones that are customized for your company. Meaning if you're using a design system and you're also making internal choices to diverge from like broader standards, the assistant, a custom assistant will help you make the most of the feature, because you'll be able to define, okay, these are our own naming convention. For example, in this case, the assistant is telling me that artboard name should start with numbers followed by the space. So this is an artboard. I'm just going to rename it, Command R. I'm going to say 1.0 because it's a starting point. The moment I fix that, that will go away. And so I just see the checkboxes on the side that will tell me, okay, based on these rules, you're doing a good job. It's still telling me, though, for this specific one, I have other things to fix. Page name should start with an emoji. Now, not every company uses emojis everywhere. We use them a lot. So you could decide that, for example, you use emojis either to indicate what that flow is about, what platform that is for. You could use a mobile icon. You could use a desktop icon, for example, or you can use it to indicate state. So say that artboard is a collection of, that page is a collection of things that have been approved. So I could have a page like that. So in this case, it's telling me symbols too should have an icon there. So I can here say, let's say diamond, use that, and now I will not get that warning anymore. Now, if I were to go back to this page, all these elements have a style applied to it, as you can see here, because I dropped them in directly from the insert window. So I sped up my workflow, not having to create a text layer first and then applying something to it. But if I, for example, pretend I just created a style and I detached it here, I had the style. Now I'll get a warning from unstyled text layer that says, hey, by the way, you have a text layer that is not using any styles. So that's something you usually, when you're creating a system, everything in your page is going to have some style associated with it. Even if you're not using symbols for everything, there's some companies that use even symbols for like a header block that might be either just an H1 with spacing above and below, or just above, or it can be typography pairings where you have H1 and H4 and define a spacing, and you always insert them that way. So that's totally another way to use symbols where you're not just using one text style at a time, one layer, but also in that case you're defining all the margins, etc., and also how these things will be behaving when placed on a page. So in this case, this will not go away until I apply a style. In this case, from anything. So it can be as simple as does not have any styles, or it could be as specific as this is an artboard, a mobile artboard, and therefore you should be applying only styles from the specific mobile library. So you can go, for example, so here I can go and apply a style. Let's say, okay. So now that warning will go away. I can also, I'll undo. I can also, when you see the warning is back, I can also just control click here and say, decide to ignore this specific one or ignore the rule for the whole document. Rules are document specific. So you just have to, once you downloaded them, you can just add them to any other document by creating let's say I create a new document. I want to apply the same assistants. I click here, manage assistants, and the ones I already installed, they can be installed in this other document again. So now I have them all. This is how it's working right now. With Sketch for Teams, we want to make it easier to also distribute these assistants so that, for example, with live collaboration, when you open somebody else's file and they're using assistants, you'll be able to see which assistants that your colleague was using and be able to install them much just by clicking. You don't have to know where that assistant is located unless it's distributed internally. With Sketch for Teams, we'll make it easier to also just say, okay, this document needs an assistant, and you'll be able to install it. One assistant that we'll be releasing that should be useful to pretty much everyone, though, is this one that tells you if, for example, you're using components from a library that's not that was not meant to be used for this project. So let's say in this case, this project is for a company called Monday Studio, which is and you only want to use a UI kit called Monday UI Kit. As you can see, I have a component here that's coming from Monday UI Kit. If I click, if I try to edit it, but it will tell me that that's connected to the cloud library, and I could decide to go and modify it that way. But then it's telling me here, hey, there's this button that instead possibly shouldn't be here. You can always kind of override that decision and say, okay, no, ignore this. And that will, and so if I do ignore, that will be gone. And I'm basically telling Sketch, hey, I know that I used potentially the wrong symbol here, but it was intentional. And that could be, let's say you're using some annotations on the side of the artboard where you're laying out text and you're not using a correct style. That could also be something where maybe you want to override that. But okay, and you can click here to reactivate the rule, and so we'll be continuously checking. So I'll do it again and just show you. Let's say I drop in a symbol from any library that's not Monday UI Kit. At the moment, Monday UI Kit is the only acceptable one for this project, let's say. And so if I drop in a card from this, I will not get the warning. I can put it here for now. And so I don't get the warning if I were to drop in instead a component from, let's say, another library. Let's say even design one, right? So where to drop it from here, I would say, well, actually, that's not a library you're supposed to be using. And so I got that notification here. So background and elevation is not really from this project. We'll provide a way to customize those libraries so that you can use you can customize what are the libraries you want to look for, but we also publish the code if you want to make your own assistant. And in that case, you just need to open basically the JavaScript file, make a change. We'll also create some educational video to show how to make those changes. So you don't have to learn about how to code assistants in general. You just need to learn how to change some parameters. And Vincent, I think you might find those beneficial as well, because if all you're trying to do is customize some of the rules, that should be pretty similar to what we'll be showing. Matteo, any other use case here of assistant?
Yeah, maybe I would show the use case with accessibility. So the clues one, maybe connected with the plugin as well if you've got the plugin installed. Just to show it, because to me it was very useful.
Perfect. So Now I turn on this other accessibility assistant. This was not made by anybody at Sketch. It was just a developer decided to make it easier for others to check the accessibility levels of, let's say, two layers you selected, like a text layer and a background layer. This developer, she's also the creator of Plus, and I'll show you how that works. So let's say I created a label here, and now I create a background, and I move it to the back. Intentionally, this is not legible right now because, and obviously I could tell also just with a naked eye that that's not legible. The colors are too similar to each other, right? But how do I know if I'm passing AA and AAA standards? So let me put this here. Okay, so you see now, this is telling me that the text must meet AA color contrast compliance, and it doesn't at the moment. So if I were to click here, we'll actually go to that text layer. And it doesn't, if it doesn't meet AA, obviously it doesn't also meet AAA, which is much stricter. So how do I fix that? I could just select these two elements. I could just go in Sketch and here, let's say apply a different color. Okay, let's say white. And then once I pass that, now that white is giving me enough contrast between these two elements that is passing both AA and AAA. But imagine this color, instead of being that purple, was actually lighter. You'll see at some point I will not be passing AAA. I'm passing AA, but not AAA. So one way, obviously, is to select the elements here one at a time in Sketch and modify them. If you have design system colors via design system, you would have to just go through a set of steps in your color scale to figure out the right contrast. But otherwise, you can also use the plugin Plus when you select two layers. And I have a million windows going on, of course. Let me rerun it and see if it pops up. It's probably popping up behind other stuff. Let me close. Let me close a bunch of stuff so it's a little neater. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now we have the plugin available. If I select two layers, it will show me the background color and the foreground color. And I can even do things like switch between the two. But in this case, it's telling me, again, it's passing down. The math is the same used between the plugin and the assistant. So if the contrast is low in the assistant, obviously it will be low here as well. I can go and change the color here, and you see now I'm passing both. Or I could change not the background, let's see. But if I could also change here, and then at some point would end up with something higher contrast the other way. So you can change. The nice thing about the plugin allows you to see both elements. Sometimes you might have to nudge one or the other. And it happens a lot that you might be still receiving brand colors that might not work well in accessibility wise. So you might have to not fight, but at least bring up the conversation with your team on coming up with colors that are both on brand and look the same, but they in reality are not necessarily exactly the same, the brand colors, because on call to actions and certain things, you really want to have the highest contrast possible. It just will be better for everybody's experience, and you'll have more conversions when you have the right level of contrast on key call to actions. So this is a nice plugin. So at the moment, assistants only tell you where the issues are. They don't tell you how. Cannot fix things for you. Plugins are still needed to fix things for you. The reason is that we wanted to get assistants out there, get feedback. So if you see some use cases that we haven't shown, let us know. We can always help and create a plugin that solves some of these issues. For example, there's plugins that delete all your hidden layers, right? The assistant can totally tell you that you have a bunch of hidden layers in your document. They're there and unused, and can point it out. But we wanted still a designer to make the call of deleting these layers and not delete them on your behalf. So we make it just easier to find all these hidden layers, and then it's up to you to figure out if you want to delete them. But it's totally possible to pair an assistant and a plugin And when it's part of a known ecosystem, you can achieve a lot better than just generic plugins. The ones I show you today are repetitive tasks. No matter who you are, you're probably doing, like copying and pasting across multiple artboards or over and over the same objects. We'll be doing even more of these meetups now that Matteo has joined us. This year obviously has been a different year. Let's put it this way. I hope you're all good, but it's been a rough year. So next year, hopefully, we'll be able to organize more events, and looking forward to getting any topics you guys might be interested in, even more specific on design systems. One thing that I know we haven't talked about yet, and I know we have a few more minutes, is the concept of having libraries that are, let's say, libraries. Here I'm going to say action turn showing. As you can see, I have, again, a ton of libraries, but from Sketch Collaboration Cloud Libraries team, this is the name of the team. We have a lot of different libraries, and these are going to be probably part of the free videos that explain how to use libraries from the simplest. It will be better than this one, I swear. Today I was a little off, but we'll be able to show you how to use a simple library. You'll be able to download sample files, how to create a more complex system with multiple libraries like this that are interconnected. Like, for example, I'm going to control click here and open this. In this case, I'm going to update it. The moment you start using live collaboration and your files in the cloud, they need to be updated slightly in terms of format. And it's good to know that they won't be able to be, they might not open 100% with older versions. So that's why during the beta also, we are inviting people to not use production files with Sketch Beta, especially if you're uploading to cloud. So in this case, I'm going to update it because it's just a demo file for us. So now, for example, these are colors, and you can see a much nicer organization than the one I was showing you live before. But imagine after having created the colors, the next step could be that it actually generates a table like this for you. And then you just go and define, okay, actually this is used for title, this color is acceptable for titles, body, and labels. And then the assistant could potentially use this page here has your rules. So let's say you define that, you want to check and nobody's using that color primary somewhere incorrectly, meaning with different styles. Let's say there's a small text, and you define that the small text should not have this primary color. That could be, or even a label, that the assistant could use this table here as a reference for your rules. It's not,
and you can also see that from the Sketch for Team account. So every viewer can also check this page without having Sketch installed, so they don't need to be designers.
Very true. So you can see this now. We are in that team that is collaboration team, and this is the artboard that we're seeing here. So this is a nice way to share this in an organized fashion. You can always, at the moment, when libraries are displayed in cloud, the same ways as standard files are displayed, which is basically just a grid view, like you were seeing here. So now this is a simple file, but you basically just as a grid view, but we want to make sure this here that libraries will be displayed also in an easier, more closer to a style guide, so that, for example, you can see all the colors, all the text styles, like you would here. So much closer to this, right? And so for this, you can then inspect it. If you upload a page you upload any files to cloud, those become inspectable. And so your developer can go and say, okay, this is a background and using this color token. And I can click here to copy. Let me make it a little smaller. I can go here and copy this. So now as a developer, I have the token in mind. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to look at the color value. I just look at the color token. Same, and here I also get, okay, well, this is the developer could recreate something like this for themselves. so that they only have, once they create, for example, title and body, title could have the default font family, spacing, etc., and then another color token would be applied for the color. So this becomes very, I don't want to call it personal, but meaning each team has their own way of then coding things. But the point is, find the common ground between you and developers, and in terms of communication, and you'll all benefit in terms of consistency. You will not have a lot of back and forth on like, oh, what gray was that supposed to be? Is this a new gray or not? There's really no value in having like a million shades of gray. As you can see here, there's already a few, but and they have different, these tokens here have different meaning. Like, this is indicating a divider, and this is indicating something that is disabled. But at the naked eye, it would be really hard for somebody that's not a designer to even spot the differences, and even for some designers. And so you want to make sure that the name helps, and that there is defined clear rules on how to use them. Okay, I think I now almost talked for an hour and 40 minutes, which is...
It was all for you, Francesco, this evening. Jacqueline asked, what ways, including any supplemental tool, do you recommend for starting rules convention to the rest of the team? I can take this one at least start, and then we can conversate about it. Actually, I would request everyone to open their mics if they want to conversate with us. It would be very nice. Actually, this is a super big topic. There are plenty of different approaches. My personal approach would be try to investigate with your team what things meanings for them, because maybe your team discovered that primary doesn't mean anything and you want to have brand, or you discovered that success doesn't mean anything and for everyone because you've got the same green for too many things and you decide to go for color green. So this is really personal, based on the products, the team, and the company you are into. There are a few guides and a few frameworks that you can refer to, and there are a lot of articles where different approaches exposed, and actually you should follow the one that suits best for you and your team, and also your developers as well. Usually, it really depends how much your library is close to what the developers are doing. If this is a proper design system, usually you are trying to stay as close as possible with their way to name things as well. But developers can be very crazy with that. So many times is a way we should find the right way to balance things and to name things in a way that, and also to make them to change things in a way that we can match the most possible. The things between us. If you go, for instance, in the typography file, Francesco, or in the core that's got both the tables, even Cloud is fine. Mm-hmm. Also for typography, you've got the same problem. For buttons, for everything, you will have the same problem. Particularly when you've got super complex design system, maybe you also have different themes. You've got a theme that is light, a theme that is dark, or different things for different brands, and everything can start to be very difficult. What is important is that it should be readable and usable from who should use the library. So if you are using the library as a designer, you should be able to understand what you are using, and in some ways the way you are naming things should be self-explanatory. And sometimes you would prefer to use folders instead, something that maybe developers are using, like connecting different classes. It really depends. My suggestion is start very small with easy things. Try to understand if they are usable in this way, and create the complexity through time, because it is very easy to start to be crazy just at the beginning, and then you find that you have to change everything. It is true that in Sketch, or with Sketch, there are plugins that help you to rename things in a batch, like renaming that Francesco showed you before. But this is complex anyway, because you have to go through all the system and review things, and etc. I don't know, Francesco, if you want to add anything to that, but
Yeah, I mean, like so one thing we showed today is how you can do pretty much everything in Sketch, but there's tons of other tools out there that can help, and it depends how far you need to go. For example, if you need more detailed specs than what we currently offer on our cloud, the tools like Zeppelin takes it to the next level because they're a dedicated tool just to doing that. We will be improving our handoff capabilities. You can already download assets. You can read, I was showing you before, you can use, you can inspect the document and inspect, let me make it a little bigger so everybody can see. You can see pretty much everything that's already within the Mac app, but we'll be adding also pinning properties, etc., resizing. And for symbols, developers will be able to not just see the details, but know the name of the symbol and be able to go to wherever the library is and find those specs. But our goal is not necessarily to become the deepest tool in every vertical here. We want to provide a really great experience for everybody that can go from designing all the way to creating clickable prototypes, share them on cloud easily, get feedback. We'll be adding annotations in the cloud, but there might be always tools that do some of these aspects better. Our goal is to unify everything under one experience, because that's what we've been hearing from our customers, that they want not have to manage multiple tools. With that said, for example, Zeppelin then allows you to also go to Storybook. So if your developers are using Storybook JS is a way to basically have all your coded components in almost if it were a design system in the cloud, design system for developers, where you can also add descriptions and how some of these components are used, but it's usually more developer heavy. Then there's other systems like Envision DSM that allows you to add more information that's more for designers and project managers, and then connects also to potentially to Storybook, I believe. I don't know if they released it already or they will. So it depends on what aspect you need to supplement of what's already in Sketch. There might be different tools to use. Abstract, for example, helps with versioning. We have versioning in cloud. Let me show you here, which means, for example, in this case, you can see I'm still editing this document. I saved it 11 minutes ago. Matteo created other versions. Now the changes might be very small, so that's why you might not see them. But you can iterate through the previous version. Let me see if I have another document where it's more obvious. Let's say I have this one, and you'll see that for this artboard here, I can see the history. I can see some comments, right? At the moment, we don't have in-page annotations, in artboard annotations, but they're coming. I think Q1 or Q2 at the latest of this year. But there's other tools like Envision already offers that, other tools as well. So if that is key for you, you can obviously use those tools. But we'll be adding those kind of features to Sketch itself. One thing that's coming also around, I think by February when we release, if not earlier, is the ability to mark one of these versions as a more important version so that it stands out to others. There's not just a save, but is a specific version. Let's say you decide, okay, this is a presentation that I made. And so everybody knows that to kind of ignore the previous rounds and just focus on the last one that might be, let's say, starred or might be made more prominent, and know that is the round one, let's say. If you have 3 of those, there would be round 1, 2, and 3, and in between is just work in progress. And then others might not even see that work in progress if they're, let's say, just viewers to Sketch for Teams or to that file, while the contributors, which are the only paid accounts within Sketch for Teams, which are the ones that need to be able to modify files on their Mac app, they will see also the interim steps. For library, that means that only you can keep working on the library and keep saving, and that will not be distributed to others until you made those changes public within your team or wherever it's subscribed by making it more prominent. So these are huge improvements are coming. In the past, you kind of had to use other systems to, like let's say Abstract or Envision, to manage who can see what and when. but I think some of these features will come to Sketch pretty soon. Okay, and Matteo, did I miss any other questions? Sorry, I haven't a chance to. I think
yeah, Vincent said that
so,
you already thought about Storybook. He mentioned also Zero High.
Right. Yeah, there's other tools. Yeah, like Zero High is dedicated to doing that. Honestly, so Zero High is also just a plugin that works on top of Sketch when it can export all the parameters, all the things you've done, colors, textiles, etc., to their own design system management tool, if you will. So that's another good one. There's, I'd say, a lot of these other tools. I invite you to take a look at all the ones. And I'm sorry, not to cut it short, but we do have a meeting we have to go to, Matteo and I. So that's why it's not that I don't want to answer. I'm happy to answer Vincent also, Slack another time. But there's plenty of tools. That's the beauty of Sketch. The file format is open, so pretty much anybody can create whatever they want with it. If you were to, let's say, I want to show you something, how easy it is to export things from Sketch. So, for example, I have primary and secondary here. Potentially, I'm going to remove that, and then I have. I had it somewhere. Let's say text, and I'm going to call it primary text, and I'm now just going to apply a color there, and then I'm going to have a secondary. Okay, so I have to. We just given these elements. If you can pass these parameters, let's say, to material design, you can, or your developer, you can create a whole customized material design set just with 4 parameters like this. There's other, Bootstrap has a lot more variables you can define. My point is, you could create a workflow, depends on what you're trying to do within Sketch. It allows you to easily export things with a plugin. In this case, I can do this. I can go, this is another plugin we've been working on. This will go from Sketch to material, and it will just pass the parameters from these 4 elements. So when I run that, we'll open this tool by Google, and you'll see the colors here are the same colors I have here, right? So I have, and I can see, for example, I can see that there's obviously I cannot use that color on that background, so I might be able to tweak it. But you can see how the colors applied if you were to just using these 4 parameters in material. We can talk a lot more about these other integrations. We'll be, Matteo and I, working on example like this in the future. But just wanted to tell you how powerful it can be if you just design consistently things within Sketch and then use those agreements between you and developers to generate something else. Okay. I think, now I also know why everybody's hanging out still. We are supposed to do the raffle. So let me do it, because I want to do it only with people that are still here than just people that RSVP'd. I want to make sure I'll use what I'm seeing here on my screen, the names, as a way to give out 2 licenses and swag. So I'll have somebody give me a number. Let's say, Jacqueline, can you give me a number? If you can type it in, and I'll remove myself and Matteo. We can all win. 7. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. K, you win a license.
I know K.
What's that? Couldn't hear you.
Great one. Thanks very much.
Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And K, another number, not 7.
11.
Okay, so, and Nazia, you win a Sketch license. Okay, and Nazia, your turn. Give me a number. And this will be for some special swag we'll be sending.
She said 8.
8. Okay.
In the chat.
And Willow, I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly. I'll say you win our swag. And I don't know if you can hear us, but that's the name is showing here on on Zoom. Okay, perfect. He confirmed in a direct message. I want to thank you all for sticking around till the end. You are definitely hardcore sketch fans. I promise next time I'll be a little more awake and make it through with less hiccups. And I'll test also a better way to share Sketch at a resolution that is more acceptable for smaller screens. So I apologize about that. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for showing your enthusiasm and face. So, and happy holidays, everyone. I know that we didn't really say much about that. I hope you all have a safe holiday, wherever you might be.
Thank you, Francesco and Matteo. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Oh, Vincent. Great to see you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.